We're talking about the big questions we have after watching Jessica Jones Season 2. And if you haven't seen the full season yet, click away now because we are going to be talking about massive spoilers. I'm Lauren and I'm joined by Dave.
Hello.
And the first question we're going to be talking about is, how many other people did Dr. Cole treat and potentially give powers to?
I mean, surely it's potentially loads, right? I mean, this guy has been around for 17 years, roughly, doing this. I mean, that's enough time to get more than 3 that we know of dealt with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the research is risky. It's by no means a guarantee. You know, you're basically going to come through with powers or die or end up some kind of useless mess along the way. But surely, I mean, just given the timescale, he has to have done, right?
Yeah. This is like one of my favourite comic book tropes, which is like, oh, there's a scientist that potentially created loads of superheroes who we might meet in future episodes.
Yeah.
Like, I love it when they do this because it does just open the door up to so many possibilities. And like you say, Jessica's accident was 17 years ago, which like originally brought her and her mum to him. He was operating for God knows how long before that, and he does obviously shut his lab down, but that's still quite a number of years. And even with the experiments that potentially didn't give people powers, like his friend, his son that he cured, they said, you know, he doesn't have powers. I mean, maybe he's lying, but, you know, even if everyone he treated in those years didn't get powers, there's definitely other people.
Plus, I mean, the fact is, Jess was a resounding success, right?
Yeah.
This might not always work, but if he absolutely nailed it somehow 17 years ago, that's a pretty good baseline for the next 2 decades to be working on, right?
Yeah.
And we know that regardless of lab, he's got a shed load of equipment in his home place anyway, right? I mean, this guy clearly doesn't necessarily need the lab to be doing this. He's been treating Alyssa for that long anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, do we really believe that nobody else is going to take his research and run with it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he shut the lab down, because he was worried about it getting into the wrong hands. But it always gets into the wrong hands.
Of course, I mean, where's the fun if it doesn't get into the wrong hands? That's the point. If you say, oh, I don't want this, it's definitely going to happen in comics, right? And plus, aside from anything else, the TV part of them at the MCU, it kind of needs more villains and more characters right now. I mean, we can't carry on just with, you know, bad magic ninjas and Kingpin and Kilgrave, right?
Yeah.
For this to continue, it needs a richer ecosystem.
More possibilities.
Yeah.
And obviously we've already seen one of them in this season, Whizzer.
Yeah.
So like, do you think season 3 we're gonna maybe see more people? Maybe Jessica will either try and find them herself?
Yeah, I think it's entirely feasible because she seems to be going that way now.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, whether they end up being friends, allies, enemies, somewhere in between, I think just having the least people person member of the MCU suddenly forced, you know, I mean, you saw like the fun it was when she had to deal with people during the Defenders, right?
Yeah.
Like having her suddenly amongst this huge bunch of like misfits and crap heroes and good villains and whatever else it throws up, it's gonna, if nothing else, it's gonna be hilarious having her to deal with it, right?
And feeling like she's responsible for them in some way as well, because like Carl had this relationship with her mother, and obviously them are gone now, so like it's kind of going to fall to her to like show these people the way and perhaps like guide them to becoming good people rather than villains, because you know when you're dealing with like raw emotion like that and powers, it can kind of go either way based on your experiences.
This is it, and it makes total sense for being the next stage of her story in season 3 personally, because
Absolutely.
if season 1 is very much the kind of facing up to trauma, breaking away and just separating that part of your life away, and season 2 is like the recovery season where you realise that you're not, you know, killing the bad guy does not suddenly make you all right, because there's, you know, there's anger, there's PTSD, there's anxiety, there's all the things she's dealing with in season 2 and realising she's still not fixed. The next stage surely will be to kind of start to deal with that and then become useful to other people as well, which again we see signs of in season 2 when she starts warming to the fact that maybe lone wolfing it isn't the right idea anymore.
Yeah, to become like a newer version of her hero.
Yeah. And the second question we have is Alyssa's violent rage really the result of brain damage, or are we looking at maybe some more natural personality traits from her past?
Yeah, I'm a bit sceptical on this one because I get why Jessica is saying that her mother's brain damaged, and that's why she is suddenly okay with like killing people if they get in her way. Like, she clearly doesn't want to, but she doesn't have a problem with it.
No.
Which is a bit of a weird thing for your mum to want to do.
Yeah.
So, and she has been through a massive trauma. She was in a terrible accident that should have killed her. She then had all these experiments done on her. She spent 5 years in a coma, and then she went through the traumatic experience of waking up and realising she'd lost a family and was having these like rage-induced fits that she couldn't control. That's a ton of trauma.
Yeah.
That could potentially lead to brain damage.
Yeah.
But that's a very specific kind of brain damage, which then leads someone perfectly functioning in every way except they now are okay with murdering people.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not like all her faculties and outlook have changed. She's still lucid most of the time. She's very much aware of who she is, what she's doing, and she feels bad about it after she's done it. You know, like the core, like, humanistic goodness is still there, but she flips and does this stuff anyway. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder how much is actually... whether that level of artificial kicking could actually happen or not.
Yeah, it feels like she just made a decision. It feels more like she's making decisions based on extenuating circumstances than her brain is actually damaged, and that's why she's doing it.
And it's interesting, I mean, if Jess... I'm not saying Jess definitely is just making excuses for it, but it would be interesting if she does. Because we see several times in the season that Jess has... she has a definite aversion to killing. She's done it. But you see that point when she gets arrested for what Alyssa's done. And that really telling shot at the end where she repeatedly says, "That's not me," because she's really steadfastly trying to hold on to where her line is, right?
Yeah.
And also we see a lot through this season of Jess basically being terrified of what she could turn into. You know, especially when they first go to the homeless shanty town. And, you know, without Jess even saying anything, Trish knows that she's worried that she could go this way if she keeps alienating people and she stays aggressive and she just can't, you know, distance herself from society further and further. Like, Jess has an absolute pathological terror of what's in her that could turn her into what she doesn't want to be. So by brushing her mother's behaviour away by saying, oh, it's an artificial thing, could she possibly be trying to hide herself away from the fact that there may be some genetic or behavioural pattern from her past that could lead her down the same path?
And I can totally understand why she's doing that, because like you said, she's scared of becoming this herself. But I do just feel like it's not necessarily brain damage. It's certainly not, you know, in commas, normal.
No.
But that doesn't necessarily mean someone's brain is damaged and that's what's causing them. I think she's making choices. And Jessica even says in a later episode that, you know, before the accident, her mum was like, you know, she alienated people and she didn't really have any friends. And she was, you know, quite a lot like Jessica in the respect of pushing people away. So it feels like maybe Jessica's worries are justified because they're quite similar and they've both been through a trauma. But she, you know, she's trying to like hold on this idea that they're not the same person, and so she's sort of she's saying to people when they confront her, you know, she's had brain damage. She was in a coma for 5 years. Like,
it's not a family thing. It's not me. And I mean, at the very least, I mean, with Alyssa, it could be that if you've basically been pulled out of your own life. I mean, she even says, "I stopped living in the real world," right? She's been pulled out of her whole life. The narrative that she was part of no longer exists. She's had her whole life, all the trappings of her life ripped away from her. That's surely going to change your moral compass to a degree. If you feel like you don't live in the same world and by the same rules you used to, your perspective of what's acceptable is going to shift. And if there is brain trauma as well, which has perhaps shifted her inhibition level at least, then, you know, brain damage may be an issue, but it may not be the entire picture, you know?
Absolutely. And quite often it isn't. It isn't just like one side of the picture.
No.
So yeah, I feel like it's maybe not brain damage, but I can see why Jessica's saying that. Okay, and the third and final big question we have after watching Jessica Jones season 2 is Trish Hellcat now?
She's on her way. She's definitely on her way, surely. I mean, she's totally got powers. That's the thing, right? I mean,
I kind of wish that they hadn't made it so obvious in the last episode with the whole like foot bone catching skills, because even without that, I think it was pretty obvious that she was going to have powers.
I mean, it's nice early on in the season when she first finds the inhaler, and if you know about, you know, her background in the comics, it's like, oh, this is a nice allusion to the way that's going to go. And, you know, it doesn't tell the exact same story because obviously comic Hellcat's backstory is very different, but it's a really nice sort of parallel thread to that, and it explores it really well. So maybe it doesn't need that massive nod at the end, but it's pretty unambiguous by the end.
But we got it anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
It's confirmed that she's got powers. Like, you can see the look on her face. Like, she's like, that's weird. Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
So season 3, I think, is she just going to go full superhero? Because it's what she's wanted for so long.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because if you look at, I mean, Jessica Jones is like probably more than any of the Netflix shows, is very much about kind of character and personality development first, with the powers wrapped around as grammar for that. And if you look at Trish, she's wanted this since season 1. Since the start of season 1, she's been the one pushing Jess to be a hero. She's been the one making the costumes, giving her the strategies, pushing her into scenarios she doesn't want to get into, managing how she behaves. She's built her own show voyeuristically in season 2. Trish Talk is now a superhero show, basically. Like, she's so desperately voyeuristically wants to be part of that world. And what we find out more about her background in season 2 and how much more troubled it was than we thought it was, she's got as much reason as Jess to be angry and want to go out and punch dudes for the wrong reasons, you know?
Something she says in a later episode that really resonated with me as well is, like, she says to Dr. Carl before they do the experiment, you know, do you know what it's like to feel helpless? Because that's how she feels, you know. She's grown up with a powered sister and an abusive mother, and she's been through a lot of what we've realised is not very nice things. And she is a strong woman.
Absolutely.
She doesn't need superpowers to be strong, but I can totally understand why she wants them. She wants them not just for herself, but to help people that are going to go through the same thing she went through as a child. So costumes at the ready for season 3.
I mean, if you've had your childhood, basically, especially when you were a kid and were younger and less able to cope with stuff, basically relying on your powered sister to be there to help you through the crap, right? And knowing that's not always an option. And this is a woman who basically, when she got her own place, built the most secure, lockdown, steel-doored, like, barricaded apartment she could, right? And that worked. She was capable, but after a while, you're going to want to stop feeling that you're hiding and you want to get out there and be proactive, right? Which is why, you know, as soon as she starts hitting the inhaler, she goes out looking for a fight, right? She's so desperate to assert some agency rather than hiding away. So, She wants
to be a hero, and I think we are going to see that in season 3. I don't think it's going to go particularly well.
Oh, it's going to go so badly.
Because it's just the classic case of, like, be careful what you wish for, right?
Oh, and she's doing it for all the wrong reasons right now as well. I mean, she's very much... I can see it turn into, like, a parallel of... What would be nice in season 3 if the role reversed a bit? And it became a parallel of season 1 where... Trish is the angry, out of control one who's got a lot of shit she hasn't dealt with. And Jess is the one going, I've been through this now. Maybe I should kind of teach you how to do this.
Absolutely.
Because Trish right now is... She's calling it heroism, but she's lashing out, basically. It's pretty much revenge for 20 years of a bad life right now.
Yeah, it's just another drug.
She just wants to take it out on someone. And you know,
which is totally understandable, but it's going to lead to other stuff.
Oh, it's going to get messy.
I can't wait.
It's going to be great. So those are the big 3 questions we have for Jessica Jones Season 2. Sets things up very nicely for Season 3 whenever that happens. While we embark along that long path of waiting and perusing what could possibly go on, we will have an absolute ton more Jessica Jones content and MCU content in general on Games Radar, so keep it tuned in.